Greetings and good evening, everyone. I am Tiara Sitnor-Diggs, and I'm one of the co-founders of Keys of Hope Consultants. It is my pleasure to welcome you this evening for our final segment of the Mental Health Empowerment Series for Faith Leaders. We hope that all who have joined us over the past 5 weeks have found the information and strategies helpful to support your congregants, communities, and even yourselves while navigating through challenging times. Being intentional and equipped to support mental health and wellness is crucial to foster a sense of resiliency, restoration, and hope. It has been an honor and a great privilege to partner with Bishop Carrington of Life Builders Church on this very important initiative. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Bishop Carrington of Life Builders Church.
Good evening, everyone, and God bless you. I am so thankful that we have been together 5 weeks. Virtual is the new normal for right now, but we accept it because much has been accomplished these 5 weeks. I am so thankful that those who registered may not know this, but every session has been and will be recorded. And we're going to be coming back and following up with all that registered and gave us their email to make sure that we can send you every session. Because although this information was great hearing it the first time, many of us are going to need a refresher. And even when this pandemic ends, we want to make sure we can go back to this information. And I'm so thankful. Now, all this was done because of the beneficence of Baltimore County seeing it possible to allow Life Builders Church to be in a posture to help the county. And matter of fact, statewide. We've also reached nationwide with this information, and these 5 weeks have been a true blessing. I am grateful for the leadership of our Honorable County Executive, Johnny Olszewski. I am so thankful that he has been a pinnacle part in making sure that faith communities have had the tools to help, whether it was a grant to feed, whether it was a grant to do things like what we're doing, whatever is done, and to be able to step out and to help our community on a regular basis. I am thankful for the county executive, for his staff, for everything that they have done to help the faith community, the community of leadership, to touch people's lives. It is indeed an honor. I'm grateful also for the Keys of Hope consultants who gave their expertise. The speakers were all phenomenal. And I am so excited about greater ahead because I can only see greater ahead. Now there's a light over my head. It's not a halo, I promise, but I do see light at the end of the tunnel. And we're going to come through this pandemic season. And I am looking forward to bouncing forward and being able to stand because of the information we receive. Tonight, we're blessed with a great speaker, Darius Gwynn. But prior to Dr. Gwynn coming on, I want to thank our county executive. Your Honor, I'm going to ask if you would come and have some words, because again, you have been a pinnacle part of making sure that this was done. Johnny Olszewski is the duly elected and proud and great serving Baltimore County executive. I am glad to be a Baltimore County resident for the last 35 years. And I know I don't look like it, but I'm so thankful to have been a part of Baltimore County since I've been married. And just 3 years I moved back in the city, but I'm back, and I am just thankful for our county executive. There is so much I could say about him, so much I could say about his care for our community, for his care about the faith community, and is genuine. Anybody that can be an elementary school teacher has to have something special. And to rise from the ranks of being an elementary school teacher to now being the Baltimore County executive, you got to have much more on the ball than meets the eye. So county executive, on behalf of Keys of Hope and Life Builders Church and all that are joining us this evening, welcome and thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring greetings. I will try to be brief so we can get to Dr. Gwynn tonight. But I want to thank you for your steadfast leadership and your partnership, Bishop, and good evening to everyone else. It is a pleasure to join you. I want to take a moment to thank and recognize the team members of our Office of Community Engagement who are great partners in helping me lead the work across Baltimore County, Mandy and Kirk, among others. And it's so great that we're doing this event tonight because in these challenging times, it is so critical that we are connected. So Bishop Carrington, I want to thank you and Lauren for inviting me to this virtual conversation about mental health empowerment. I'm glad to be here in appreciation of the work of this series to promote mental health and wellness. Dr. Gwynn, thank you for taking the time to help us improve our own mental health and the mental health of others. At a time when so many of our neighbors and loved ones are struggling, it's more important now than ever that we find ways to be there for each other. And mental health is such an important part of our overall well-being. It's so important we take care of ourselves. COVID-19 has changed everything about what we know. Although, as you said, Bishop, the light is at the end of the tunnel. It's certainly been difficult for me. I'm a huge extrovert. I often find myself physically, mentally, spiritually drained from the lack of that personal in-person connectivity. And for others, it might be you haven't been able to do a hobby, you've missed celebrating an important milestone, you can't see your loved ones, you may have lost a loved one to COVID, or you may have been sick. And life is hard enough during normal times, but COVID has really pushed us to the extreme and made things so much harder. That's why I think events like this are so critical, and it's why we in Baltimore County are here to support it, because it's important that we are connected to our support networks, and our faith community is one of the most important support networks we have, particularly as believers. Psalm 91 reminds us that I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Our faith reminds us that it is an anchor upon which we all can lean. And I think that tonight is going to be a great example of how we can lean on our faith, on our friends, on each other, and we are here to be supportive. So Dr. Gwynn, thank you again for stepping up. Thanks for everyone for being a part of this. Together we can get through this. Together we will get through this. But again, Bishop Carrington, thank you. Lauren, thank you. And thank you, Darius Gwynn, for your sharing tonight. It is an honor and a blessing to be with you. And I pray everyone stays happy and healthy as we get through this together.
Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. We are glad to have you and your team. It's been wonderful connecting with Mandy. It's always a pleasure to connect with Bishop Carrington and the work that he's doing. Also, me as a Baltimore County resident as well. I appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate you sharing those words of encouragement, especially from Psalms 91, that gives hope as we move forward, as we see that light at the end of the tunnel. So I am going to introduce our presenter for this evening. Mr. Darius Gwynn is a doctoral candidate in the School of Social Work at Morgan State University. He's also the owner of Breaking Barriers Mental Health Services. He's a native of West Baltimore, Maryland. He received his bachelor's degree in business administration and finance from Bowie State University and attained his master's degree in social work from Howard University. Mr. Gwynn has more than 7 years of social work experience and has served in both clinical and administrative positions. Before he started his private practice with Breaking Barriers Mental Health Services, he was a lead therapist at All Walks of Life, LLC, and a program manager for a small agency in Maryland. As a doctoral candidate and researcher, Mr. Gwynn's research depression and men coping and masculinity. Currently, he's in the process of articles of coping in men and has been recognized as one of the rising stars in the field of social work research and mental health. He has made numerous public speaking appearances nationwide and continues to look to educate those who serve our most vulnerable neighborhoods and populations. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gwynn to continue to lead us through this discussion, coping through challenging times.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, for having me. Thank you to the Keys to Life staff. Thank you, everyone, for giving up a part of your Monday to be with me and to hear what I have to say about coping through challenging times.
And while we're waiting for Dr. Gwynn to pull up his PowerPoint, we just want to let everyone know that Lauren and myself will be watching the chat box. We do encourage people to participate. And so if something resonates with you or you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put it in the chat box, and Lauren and I will make sure that we will communicate that with Dr. Gwynn so that he can address any questions or any thoughts that you may have. So please feel free to participate.
Okay, again, I'm Darius Gwynn. I am a doctoral candidate at Morgan State, where my dissertation topic is on examining the coping strategies of Black men with self-reported depression. I think that coping is extremely important to look at, and oftentimes not examined enough, especially in urban and suburban communities. Often we talk about mental health, but from the perspective of medication. How can this medication make you feel better about your emotions? However, we forget that we have the natural ability to actually cope with these things, and sometimes we're able to overcome these obstacles without the use of medication. So again, this is Coping Through Challenging Times. The objective of this presentation is to educate you all on mental health facts, stress management, coping, to encourage you all to self-examine your coping strategies, the coping strategies of the people that you interact with, and hopefully to encourage you all to utilize some more adaptive or positive coping strategies in your daily routine. Before I move to the icebreaker, I would like to hear from you. What are some things that you guys are expecting to learn from this?
Hi, this is Kirk. I'm from the County Executive's Office. How are you doing, Darius?
I'm doing pretty well, Kirk.
I've been with the County Executive's Office for a short period of time, but I've been in the human services piece for as long as I can remember, man. And I'm finding out in my travels and my connections with other individuals that caregivers are the least of us that will seek care for ourselves. We're oftentimes so involved, enthralled, if you will, with making sure that our family, friends, and neighbors and everyone else that we encounter are okay. But we often will not seek that same okay space for ourselves. So I'm hoping to get something along those lines from this that I can pass along to others that are looking to do the same, to find some safe place for themselves in challenging times like this.
We're definitely going to touch on those coping strategies that you can use, because I do think it's important for caregivers to take that self-care for themselves too, because you spend a lot of energy giving to other people, and sometimes that can drain you. So I think it's important to learn self-care techniques. Anyone else?
We have someone in the chat. They would like to learn how to reduce stress or not allow it to become toxic.
Okay.
My desire, Darius, I have several of our staff on the line, not the line, but on Zoom with us. They don't all want to be called out, and I understand that. But we are looking forward to you kind of putting the icing on the cake, so to speak, to make it even more of something that's seen as vital. Essential is a word I think that's being used nowadays, that the faith community and the political arena, those in authority, work hand in hand and closely together. Not to be preachy, but I do believe that that's the way it was intended to be. And I'm grateful for those that are on the county executive staff who are also on, because I think that their desire to still stay on, they could have just said what they wanted to say and got off. But the fact of the matter is they realize they need help. So I'm just pushing you to really Give up the goods, sir, because people need help and they're going to get it.
Yeah, Darius.
And no pressure.
Yes.
Yeah, Darius. Calvin here. Yeah, I would just like to learn proper communication methods you can use with people who may, suffer from anxiety. Because I know anxiety is something that's very difficult that a lot of people deal with, especially in this day and age where people really have to take the time to sit back and actually be with themselves. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. That's something you never really thought you would have to deal with. So if I could learn ways to communicate with those people effectively, because sometimes it's not about what you say to them, it's about how you say it to them. So if you could provide us with some tools we could use, that would be very useful to me.
And Calvin, to your point, self-isolation is real. And we do have to learn how to navigate and communicate with people differently now that we are essentially by ourselves. And that can make us feel a lot of emotions. It can make us feel irritable. It can make us feel depressed. It can make us feel anxious ourselves. And then we can almost project our emotions onto other people and kind of like increase their anxiety. I want you all to know that if I do not address your questions within this PowerPoint, that I am available afterwards to address any issues that you may have. So thank you for your question. So I wanted to do an icebreaker. I want to do like a temperature check with you guys. Because again, COVID has been here for about like 8-9 months. It's almost Christmas. We're starting to feel those holiday blues. How are you feeling right now? And you could tell me like 1 to 10, how are you feeling? And I would like for each of you to tell me.
If you want to start with me, I'm a 10 myself.
Okay.
I'm definitely just blessed overall because I know there's a lot of people who aren't the same. So I just try to say as blessed as possible with that because I definitely had a great 2020 to be honest.
Okay. 2020 has definitely blessed some folks.
Okay, in the chat, we have some 6s and 7s popping in, 7 or 8, 6, 5 and 6s. So far we have above 5.
That's a good thing. That means that we're using adaptive or positive coping strategies at least. But hopefully after this, you'll learn some coping strategies that can take you to where Calvin is, and you can be at like a 10 or 8 or a 9. So I want to talk to you guys about how mental health in COVID how mental health in COVID-19 era is a growing crisis. From late February through August, we have seen 388,000 people screened for moderate to severe anxiety and depression, which is way more than what we would normally see. Normally, we would see a number almost half of that. But because of the isolation that people have been feeling, the numbers have been increased by a lot. We have also seen over 60,000 people, and from last I checked, as of November, we are looking at 102,000 people who have been screened for psychosis. So psychosis is basically, for lack of better words, when you lose grasp of reality. You're either hearing things, or you're hallucinating, or you're dealing with things of that nature. Of the 388,000 people who were screened for severe to moderate depression and anxiety, over 130,000 have reported suicidal or self-harming thoughts, and more than half report that they have been having these thoughts every day. So have you guys encountered anyone who started to feel depressed during this pandemic? And you guys can interact too. I want it to be interactive. I don't want it to be I don't want it to be like just me talking. I want to hear from you.
Well, I haven't encountered anybody myself, but my girlfriend Denzel, she's a social worker too, so she tells me about it all the time, especially in her line of work. So she encounters it. She encounters it pretty often. She hears a lot of stories about it. So myself, especially since I try to social distance as much as possible, I haven't myself run into anybody, but I've heard plenty of stories about it.
Okay.
One thing that I encountered, Darius, is right at the beginning of the year, I participated and joined a couple of Facebook groups in the attempt to be more social. And then boom, we got hit, okay? And it was an interesting observation to watch how people were coping. We're talking March, April now. How they were coping. People were spending lots of money ordering things on Amazon, ordering food, couldn't go anywhere. And that social connect of, using Facebook and everything was huge. So I venture to say, yes, I experienced a lot of people struggling emotionally during that particular part of the time.
Yeah. And to your point, that COVID weight is real. I never ordered from Uber Eats so much in my life. Like Chipotle, Chick-fil-A has been my best friend during this time.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk to you guys more about how mental health has been affected by COVID. So again, since February, we have seen more than 500% increases in both stress and depression among people. More importantly, we are noticing as social scientists that this stress and anxiety is hitting the younger people harder than any other group. And that's because of loneliness and social isolation. So again, we noticed that in comparison to earlier this year in April, the severity of these mental health disorders have increased from 70,000 in terms of being on track to being at risk of severe depression or suicide to over 300,000. Special populations are experiencing high anxiety and depression, including LGBTQ, caregivers, students, veterans, and trauma survivors. What I thought was interesting is that when the coronavirus started, there was a spike in child abuse, domestic violence, and killings among the trans community. And it started to make me think, why is it that these people are being victimized? And so I did research, and in particular, I found that because of people with trauma, they see trans people as a vulnerable population. So sometimes people will take their anger and their frustration out on that particular population. However, it's important to learn how to cope, because coping can help reduce your stress, your anxiety, and thus can reduce acts of violence. So you see here, we have a table that shows you how young people are disproportionately affected by depression and anxiety during this COVID pandemic. And they seem to be doing worse than every other age group by a lot, except in anxiety, but by a lot. So I want to talk to you guys about stress.
While you go to the next slide, we do have a question in the chat. The question is saying, do you see the numbers increasing due to seasonal depression? And if so, what are some ways to combat this comorbidity?
So with seasonal depression, and I'm actually this year has been kind of scary for me as a clinician, because of the social isolation. And normally, as Americans, we normally seek social support in order to cope with hard times. And with the social isolation, it kind of increases that depression. When the seasonal depression come, or the holiday depression, as it's going to be called this year, I do have a fear that rates of suicide will increase. I do feel that that the holiday blues is going to negatively impact, or further negatively impact, these vulnerable populations. Before we talk about stress, I want to talk about the main concerns of different races. For Black people, it's a financial concern. Again, with COVID came job loss, came the stopping of school, which means that parents had to figure out daycare situations, and that really affected a lot of people's pockets. For Native Americans, they're experiencing a lot of PTSD. For our Latinx brothers and sisters, they're experiencing a lot of anxiety and loneliness and isolation. And I could not find any information about the Caucasian population, but based off of what I read, I'm assuming that they're dealing with similar situations. I want to talk about what is stress, right? So stress is a normal response to a situation. You have eustress, which is good stress, which can come from you winning money off a scratch off, or you have de-stress, which is bad stress. Stress response is very based on the person, and it can take our bodies through 3 stages. The first stage is the alarm stage, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And that's more of a physical thing, when we literally react naturally. Either we freeze up in a situation and do nothing, we run from a situation, or we fight against the situation. So the second stage is more of the resistance stage. And that's more of a biological stage, where your body helps you fight whatever stressors that you're dealing with by releasing endorphins. This release of endorphins can make you tired, but it gives you that extra push that you need to fight against whatever stressors that you are dealing with. The final stage is the exhaustion stage. And this stage is dangerous because you're essentially given into the stress. So in my opinion, I think a lot of people have reached the exhaustion stage of COVID, where they're tired of fighting against this pandemic, and they want to be amongst their family. And because they want to be among their family, they give into their stress, and they allow themselves to put themselves in dangerous situations, i.e. not wearing a mask or being a part of large gatherings, just so they can ease their stressor. So quick question. Throughout this pandemic, which stress stage do you feel that you have been experiencing the most? Remember, the alarm stage is fight, flight, or freeze. The resistance stage is you're fighting against it, but it has wear and tear on your body and your mental. And the exhaustion stage is when you just give into your stress.
Well, I mean, if I had to choose one, I guess it would be the exhaustion stage. But I've never really had a whole lot of anxiety. Besides, like, I mean, I don't want to spread it to my parents or anything, but I mean, I've just been taking the precautions, socially distancing, not going to events with a whole lot of people, washing my hands, bathing correctly, just doing everything I have to do. Because I'm with the mindset in my life, if you do what you're supposed to do, what's supposed to happen will happen. So if you do everything you have to do, you're supposed to do, you were cautious, and you end up getting COVID, that's unfortunate, but you did everything you can do. There's no point, at least to me, in my experience, there's no point in worrying about things that you can't control, because all you're doing is stressing yourself out. You're creating anxiety for yourself, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
So just do everything you can do and, continue to move forward.
I think for me, definitely exhaustion. When you just think about so much happening at one time, especially when you have a family. So to go from the office to home, from school to virtual learning, us trying to figure it out, those who have young kids, it was a lot to absorb at one time. Also, stress of trying to figure everything out at one time can be very exhausting. Is the not knowing, the uncertainty of what's going on with the virus, but also trying to make sure yourself and your family is safe, not only physically, but again, that mental aspect. As you were talking about the isolation from friends, when you're in routine and your children are, with their friends at school, when you think about the parents who are looking forward to prom and looking forward to graduations, and all of those things, they get taken away when you're taken away from your support system, and that whole touchy feeling, you just at home trying to figure everything out. When all of your roles are colliding in under one space, I think it definitely reached a level of exhaustion when you have so many roles that all of your roles that you play is happening all at one time. It was very overwhelming to the point of exhaustion.
And I would probably say for me, I would have to say fight, but fight from a lens of being resilient. But at the same time, it still causes a sense of exhaustion, because in this moment, and as a clinician and as a human, and then with all the other hats, you do want to try to continue to still create a sense of normalcy in your day and your children's day and whoever else you're connected to and responsible to. And so there is something in you at your core that wants to continue the fight and say, you know what, no matter what's going on, I'm going to continue to do whatever it is that I need to do. But at the same time, it does weigh heavy on your soul, to the point that you are exhausted mentally, physically, just trying to keep things all together. And that even kind of connects with, like, that cape we all sometimes wear, that we're going to continue that cape no matter what. But at some point, it drives us down to that we do begin to feel exhausted and even sometimes freeze, which is where some of that anxiety, that depression, and all of those other feelings that many people are experiencing during this time. Because again, after fighting for so long, you do get tired and you do need to tap out and you do need to take time to sit down and recharge and restore. And sometimes it's just difficult because again, we're still trying to hold on to that last piece of normalcy as best as we can under the circumstances.
That was excellent. That was an excellent explanation. So what does stress look like during the coronavirus pandemic? It looks like us worrying or fearing about our own health, the health of our loved ones, changes in our sleeping patterns, and difficulty concentrating. Sometimes it can even be the worsening of chronic health problems, and that could be due to external factors outside of the pandemic. For example, I know that from my research that people with diabetes have been struggling during this pandemic because of the scarcity of certain foods. They were not able to eat properly, thus their levels became off. Increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, which is actually a coping strategy, a maladaptive coping strategy. So what, we can skip this because I think that we talked about this already. But during this, I wanted to talk about what actually stresses you out and how does it look. Because I wanted to get an idea. I wanted you all to get an idea of what your triggers are, because knowing your triggers are extremely important with dealing with your stress. So stress impacts everything. It impacts your body, your feelings, your behavior, literally everything. And it also affects your mood. So here you can see that you'll start to feel anxious, restless, feel lack of motivation, feeling overwhelmed. You'll have feelings of irritability. All of these things come when you're stressed. So it's important to know what your triggers are so you can identify how to reduce them. So this video is basically going to give you guys an idea of how stress affects our body.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases, such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code. And they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
So I thought that video was important because it gave you a more in-depth look at how stress affects your body on a biological level. So we know you're stressed now, but
Darius.
I'm sorry?
Oh, can we take a quick temperature check to see if that video resonated with anyone, if they kind of look at stress in a different way? Because sometimes I think we look at stress just in one way, but just that video kind of maybe open up some different avenues of how to look how stress may be present. So do you mind if we do like a quick temperature check to see if anyone kind of like got a different message of what stress may look like for them? Just to even seeing that video.
I'll answer. So part of my role at the county executive's office is to receive inquiries when they come in from, let's say, Health and Human Services, or it might be from Department of Aging. As you might imagine, of late, those have been just horror stories about people potentially falling through the cracks. They're unable to get their, let's say, SNAP benefits. So, kids and people aren't eating. You might have one of our senior citizens that no one hasn't seen for a while. No one's checked in on her and things of that nature. So, I get these stories and they're just tugging at your heartstrings. You know what I mean? And your job is to grab it, get a synopsis of it, frame it, and get it over to whatever body that can address those needs. But, it doesn't end there. You send the story over, I get some feedback, and they say, oh, Kirk, we were able to contact Miss Jones. She's okay now. Someone's checked on her, or we reconnected Miss Benjamin with her benefits. Those are great stories, but they all don't end that way. I say all of that to say, you get these stories, and the ones that don't end well because you weren't able to help in some way, which are rare, you sometimes keep them with you. You think about them when you're having a snack, when you're having a meal. You think about them when it's cold outside and you've gotten a story of someone being homeless and out in this cold weather. And right now it's, they're talking about some inclement weather coming in on Wednesday. So, that plays with you. And to what Darius is talking about, you have to have some kind of way to be able to deal with it positively. And for me, I go to the gym regularly, and the gym is unfortunately not available to me either. So it's like, what the heck? So I have a dog, of course. I do a lot more petting, a lot more cuddling, and we walk a lot more now because I just need that great space that we were talking about earlier, Darius, that you can be in and remain in as long as possible so you can be replenished and I can still be effective in my job, because I'm surely not if I am inundated with, enveloped with, overcome with a lot of stress. I'm sorry to take up so much time.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Miss Michelle Bernstein, you look like you have something to say. I see your face there.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Kirk was saying. I also, part of the community engagement team. And so during the pandemic, our jobs really shifted, to some of that sort of, I'm not a trained social worker. So, but the calls that we would get before the pandemic, right, it would be pretty clear if something was social services, but we would sort of hand them right over. But we've had a lot people calling saying, I'm really holding out for my unemployment insurance and benefit. And they're calling saying they just need help with that. But then in the conversation with them, they reveal, oh, well, I have no food in the pantry and I have no gas in the car, but all I need is my unemployment insurance. And so as Kirk said, it's we're not in these jobs, without caring for people, but it's really sort of changed overnight the nature of the work that we do without sort of a whole lot of training. And as Kirk's saying, then ourselves also, trying to cope with it as well. So just, I appreciate him listening with everyone, but it's great to hear my colleagues also share as well.
And Kirk and Michelle, thank you for both pointing that out. And I'm sure Darius will kind of speak more to it, just about the whole thing around secondary trauma and secondary stress. And so even if sometimes we ourselves have gotten our households and our lives in order because of the heavy load and the hard work that we do as human service people, whether you're a clinician, a social worker, or whatever your role is, but you're connecting with people, we take on, as much as we pour into people, we also take on a lot of what they are going through. And it's not sometimes an issue of a boundary issue, but a human issue. We're humans. And so we care very much about the people that we're working with and called to serve. And so again, their stress does become our stress. And we have to be mindful of that. Because like I said, sometimes we can confuse ourselves and say, oh, I'm okay. I have my coping skills in order. But again, when we're taking on other people's stuff, we also take on that stress. So we have to look at stress and make sure that we also are using these coping skills that Darius will talk about to manage that as well, just to keep our mental health and so we can do our job effectively.
Yes, but that's a good segue, Tiara. And yes, we do take on a lot of stress, but the good thing is that we can manage our stress through the use of coping strategies, which is here. So in academia, you have this guy and this lady named Richard Folkman and Suzanne Lazarus. Richard Lazarus and Suzanne Folkman. And they're basically the mother and father of coping strategies. Before them, no one was talking about the idea of coping. Coping, the closest we got to coping was Sigmund Freud, who was the father of psychology, who talked about defense mechanisms. But essentially, Richard Lazarus and Suzanne Folkman said that any way that you adjust to a negative or positive situation is a coping strategy. It's your coping abilities. So conceptualizing coping, right? So there's multiple ways that we can conceptualize coping. So coping can be conceptualized in a biological form, fight or flight, which we talked about earlier, a cognitive form, how we think about the situation, and a behavioral form, which is basically related to the cognitive process. How we think about the situation is how we want to react to it, right? So I have a big fear of dogs. I honestly believe it's biological because for me, I just don't like them. I don't want to be around them. I think that they feel weird. They smell weird. I just don't like dogs.
Here,
So
I'm just messing with you.
Cognitively, I'm aware of my fear. And because I'm aware of my fear, I create plans to avoid that stressor or that fear or to cope with that fear. And I cope with it by changing my behaviors. So that means that if I love to ride my bike. So if I'm going to ride my bike, I'm going to make sure that I avoid neighbors or neighborhoods that have a lot of dogs in it. So, so I grew up in West Baltimore, where it's a lot of pit bulls. I'm
trying to help you cope here, sir.
I used to have my mother drive me to Columbia just to ride my bike when I was a kid, because that was my way of coping with that fear. And sometimes our coping strategies can be learned behaviors. And we can model our coping strategies from our parents, from the people in our communities, from our mentors, from whoever. whoever has some type of influence on you, you can model their coping abilities. So before meeting Lauren, I had a temper, right? But from watching her and watching how she handled certain situations, I started to change my behaviors to match her behaviors. And that was my way of coping with negative situations. So instead of being very blunt, or instead of showing aggressive body language, I would model her body language and kind of like handle that stress internally. So all coping strategies are voluntary and involuntary, in which I mean coping strategies are based off of the situations, and no matter what the situation is, we address these situations with these three types of coping strategies: either emotion-focused coping, problem-focused coping, or avoidance coping. Oftentimes in the literature, or if you speak to people who have wrote about coping in the 90s or early 2000s, back in the day, you'll notice that avoidance coping is mashed together with emotion-focused coping. However, recently, social scientists and myself, we have taken avoidance coping and used it as a separate coping strategy. So emotion-focused coping efforts are directed to regulate our emotional state. So that means we're doing wishful thinking. We're trying to self-control our feelings. We're seeking meaning of certain situations, self-blame, expressing and sharing our feelings to other people, or emotionally venting. So again, emotion-focused coping is used a lot because it's normally a way in which we can reduce our stress immediately. Because if I'm feeling upset about something that Calvin has done, I'm going to go and vent to Pastor Carr. And that's going to make me feel better. However, the issue with emotion-focused coping is that it does not address the issue. Problem-focused coping, on the other hand, directly addresses the issue. Problem-focused coping are efforts to act on the source of the stress and change the situation to either eliminate or significantly reduce the stressor. So when we use problem-focused coping strategies, we're either in the planning stages to actually reduce that stressor. So if I'm in a financial bind, okay, I'm looking at my finances. I'm trying to figure out where I can pull money to pay this particular thing. Confrontation of the issue. If I have an issue with Calvin, instead of going to Pastor Carr, I'm gonna go straight to Calvin and assertively, not aggressively, but assertively address that issue. And using social supports in a more positive way. Having your support system help you through that process. And oftentimes you see problem-focused coping as it relates to social support in grievance situations, when we help our loved ones grieve the loss of someone else. Avoidance coping efforts are efforts to completely ignore the stressor. So this can be seen when you engage in a drug use, alcohol use, sex, comfort food, or impulsive shopping. Avoidance focused coping, similar to emotion focused coping, does not directly address the issue. However, it makes you feel good in that moment. So there's a process to coping. So you have the appraisal stage, and then you have the coping stage. So on the screen, you'll see a green and a yellow type of box. These are your appraisal stages. So in the green stage, a big event happened. that causes the stressor. In the yellow stage, you're appraising that stressor to see how you're going to actually react to it. Again, coping is voluntary. Sometimes it's involuntary, and it's only involuntary during that alarm stage when we're using fight, flight, or freeze. And then we cope using one of the 3 coping strategies: emotion-focused coping, problem-focused coping, or avoidance coping. So I want to talk specifically about some coping strategies that you all can use to reduce your stress, and some coping strategies that you can teach your loved ones to use. So, but before talking about those things, I want to talk about decreasing vulnerability factors, right? So there's some things that we engage in that really increases our vulnerability and can make us feel even more stressed. And especially during COVID, there's certain things in which we can do to completely reduce or eliminate those risk factors. For example, you hear the word death all the time on TV. Today, we saw 300,000 people die of COVID. We saw 150,000 people die of COVID. We heard 3 people got shot. Death is a word that you hear a lot. And death is a traumatizing thing that we somehow became numb to. So although we are numb to it, it still has an effect on us. But to eliminate our exposure to it, we can turn off our TVs, or limit the amount of time that we watch the news. We could turn off the news app on our phones. We can reconfigure our social media algorithm so that news stuff won't pop up like that. We can reduce interactions with negative people, because sometimes we have those people in our lives who no matter what you do, it's always woe is me. And you can talk to those people, and this is addressing Calvin's thing about the anxiety earlier. You can talk to those people, and you could tell those people that, and you could possibly use something like this: hey, I really want you in my life, and I really enjoy talking to you. However, maybe we can limit talking about this insert negative topic for maybe 5 minutes, and then we can move on to something else. Because then you're being sensitive to their feelings and what they want to talk about, but you're also creating a boundary. And boundaries are important to coping, because without boundaries, people will have too much access to you, thus increasing your stress. And also, you can't run to WebMD for everything. And this is just a personal thing, because I thought I had COVID like 14 times, but it was just seasonal allergies, or maybe I had a little cough or something. I got asthma, so sometimes don't pay attention to WebMD. But we can also reduce the consumption of mood-altering substances, which includes my drug of choice, Pepsi and Coke. Because Coca-Cola and Pepsi has caffeine in it. Caffeine increases anxiety. And if you are already an anxious person, then that may give it that extra spike that you don't need, that can just completely throw your day off. And also marijuana, opioids, any other mood-altering substances. I know that we're working from home. However, it's important that you keep your workspace separate from your place of relaxation. That means that if I'm working in this space right here, in my little apartment, in my kitchen, this is my designated workspace. I'm not going to try to relax here. I'm not going to try to eat here, because just simply being here is symbolic to some type of stress. So I want to make sure that I have places in my home where I am completely relaxed, and that's why I use it for. So often you'll meet people who say, "Oh, I can't sleep," and sometimes it's not even related to anxiety or depression. However, it's related to their inability to cope with work-related stress because they do work in their bed. Because you do work in your bed, now your bed is your place of work and not your place of relaxation. So remember, you have to separate your place of relaxation from your workspace. So stress relaxing activities. This is something that I want everybody to do. I want everyone to take, and because we're running out of time, I want everyone to take 1 minute. I'm going to set the timer on my phone, and I want you to write down a list of activities that you enjoy doing. You could write this down on your phone, on your tablet. I just write it somewhere. 1 minute.
Darius, you gonna put the Jeopardy music on?
I mean, I wish I had it, but I don't got that album. I don't have that album on.
Oh, goodness. You're doing great, man. This is great stuff. Just wanted to say that.
I appreciate you.
Hey, Darius, can I speak to something that you were talking about while we're waiting?
Yes.
So you were talking about coping, and while you were saying that, I was having this epiphany that many of the calls or inquiries that we get into the office, they are coming with, and I think we do a great job, forgive me for patting myself and my colleagues on the back here, but we do a great job of figuring out real quickly which type of person that we're talking to or where they are in the coping stage. We know if they're coping well in the language generally that they're using. It's, hi, how you doing? I just want to see if I can get some help with that kind of thing. Thank you for calling me back, that kind of thing. So we say, oh, they're coping well, we could say. Then we get the one that is, a little more intense. They're not coping as well, you would say. I just need some help with this. And then, it's that kind of interaction. And then we know when we get one of the other ones, but they're not coping well at all. Their stress level is very high. All of the language is very in your face. The tone is very hard. The even the font is aggressive. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. And as a group, and we all see each other's responses and things like that. But as a group, I just see that we do a very good job of not being drawn into whatever the well, let me put it a different way. We stay focused on what the goal is. We do a very good job of trying to capture what it is that they're trying to say and addressing the issue. We don't get into a lot of, I'm sorry to hear that and that kind of stuff. We just stick directly on what it is we're there to try and help them solve. We'll also know if the person isn't coping well, if they start with like Pavlov's hierarchy of needs. They'll just say, I just need help with this, like my colleague Michelle said, I just need help with this thing. When in fact, once we get into the conversation or they begin to really get into it, there's a plethora of need there. And they are just maybe ashamed or don't want to really ask about or don't want to get into. So I was just having that thought when you were saying the ability to be able to cope that, wow, we can almost tell from the email that we get and how it's formed, how it's the language is being used, even the font of where they are in their coping stages. Forgive me for babbling on, but
no, that's a good thing. And remember to continue to do what you're doing, which is remaining calm, because then they would model your tone. So you want to remember to continue to do that. So with these stress relaxing activities, I want you guys to later on, because we're low on time, I want you to try to figure out how you can incorporate those things throughout your week. Those things will help you in terms of your ability to cope. So this here is called positive self-talk, right? So we talk to ourselves all the time, either in our head or what have you. However, our self-talk is not always positive, and sometimes we use a lot of negative self-talk, and we tell ourselves like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm not going to lose weight before my birthday trip to Jamaica. I can't do it. But we gotta use that positive self-talk and be like, well, I can lose weight. I can try this. I'm going to do this. I can. So you want to make sure that you use positive self-talk. And I apologize for rushing, but literally only have 8 minutes. So one thing that I also want you guys to try is yoga. Yoga is a really good stress reducing technique that you can use that's not only good at reducing stress and depression, but can also increase your flexibility, and it can improve your sleep that you have at night. So self-care is the number one coping strategy I want you guys to use during this time of COVID. And self-care is providing adequate attention to one's own physical and psychological wellness. This can increase your job satisfaction, your outlook on life, and even increase your worker effectiveness, either in school or at work. So self-care has 5 dimensions, which are psychological, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual. However, sometimes we forget about self-care because we're not allowed to engage with our loved ones because of social distancing. But remember that social distancing is not social isolation. And there are ways in which you can still connect with your loved ones, either through FaceTime, Zoom, Hinge, Bumble, however you want to interact with them, you can do that. You can even set time to eat with your loved ones online or over the phone if they're elderly, however you want to do that. You can also take time to take a walk through Drew Hill Park after dark, find a spot for y'all to spark conversation. I don't know. So y'all can do that. Y'all can also really talk to each other about what you're grateful for. So Jill Scott, yeah. So in terms of psychological and emotional coping, you want to always remember to be emotionally regulated. Like John was saying, that he and his team are really good at being emotionally regulated, giving attention to things that are in your control. If something is out of your control, let that be out of your control. Worry about that later. However, focus on the things that are in your control. And make effective behavioral choices. Set clear boundaries like we talked about before in terms of your time and your energy. Recognize your strength. Use positive self-talk that we talked about earlier, which would counteract those negative self-talks. And use affirmations. Tell yourself, I look good every morning. Even if you look busted, tell yourself, I look good. Stress management. Do deep breathing exercises. Practice mindfulness, which includes yoga, guided imagery, journaling, because awareness is key. And being aware of your stress will help you engage in those problem-solving coping strategies that you need in order to resolve your issues. So in regards to the physical component, I was going to talk to you guys about how you guys keep yourself moving, but I want to make sure that I keep going. Stay active. Go for that walk. If you can't walk, make sure you go for that roll. But whatever you do, keep moving. Get adequate amount of sleep. Try to get between 6 and 8 hours a night. An hour before you attempt to go to sleep, make sure that you turn off your cell phone, put it on Do Not Disturb, whatever you have to do. Try not to touch your phone because the light activates a part of our brain that keeps us up at night. So you want to make sure that an hour before you intend to fall asleep, that you are getting rid of your phone. Make sure that the room is at a good temperature for you. We fall asleep faster when the room is cooler. This can help us cope because when we're able to get more or adequate sleep, it helps our body internally, which reduces our stress levels. And sleeping is a coping strategy. Healthy nutrition, making sure that we eat well. That's a coping strategy. Instead of overeating or eating comfort food, make sure that you grab an apple. Prevention of illnesses, which includes going to a doctor. If you have so many fears about being sick, make sure that you're coping by communicating with your doctor. Intimacy. Making sure that you can hug people. Hugging reduces stress. Sex reduces stress. And general bodily health. Spirituality. Prayer is extremely important, or meditation, depending on your religious belief. But prayer to me is extremely important. Make sure that you at least give yourself enough time with God every morning, evening, and night. Because the big man will work some things out for you. I consider prayer to be a problem-focused coping strategy, because sometimes you pray and you're able to just come up with just that right solution. Reflection and spend time in nature. So in your leisure time, make sure that you're doing things that you enjoy. Become a plant parent. I'm a plant daddy of 5 kids. Play a game. Buy a PS5. Do arts and crafts. Spend time with a pet, not a dog, but any other pet. Set boundaries with your time and with your personal space. But make sure that you prioritize your self-care. I wanted to share with you guys some resources that I have. These are some mobile apps for self-care. You have Calm, you have Headspace, Strides, MyFitnessPal, Grateful. These are all different things that you can use that are free that can help you in your journey to cope with whatever you have going on. Grateful is really good if you just want to write out your thoughts. Journaling is extremely effective. It's an extremely effective coping strategy with getting your thoughts and your feelings out. These are some national supports for you guys and anyone else who may fail to, who may have difficulties with coping. Again, we're going into the holiday season and isolation is real. And most social scientists are expecting an increase in suicide. So please make sure that you know the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number. And if ever you want to talk to somebody, you can always call me at Breaking Barriers Mental Health Services. Ms. Benita Smith at Insightful Behavior Services, All Walks of Life, or Win Family Services. This was a self-care assessment that I wanted you guys to partake in. But that's it for me. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Dr. Gwen, I just wanted to say, one, thank you. I think that was the information you provided was amazing. And I just wanted to take just a little second to let people know that if you are looking for ways to, you're like, well, yoga and exercise and things like that, we can't go outside, it feels like we can't go outside, right? But there is a lot that's on like YouTube and social media, and people right now are offering free virtual classes live through Facebook or live through Instagram, you name it. There are a lot of free classes, and there are also a lot of free community groups like there's one Black Yoga Alliance group. So there's many groups that may speak to you that are out there that you can also take a look at too. This is just my little plug for yoga because I am a yoga instructor. But anyway, that's just my thing, is that to let you know that if you feel like you're not sure where to start, online platforms are all the rave right now because we're in this together. We just have to do it another way than in class. So that was just a little plug about the exercise piece, is find it online.
Yeah,
and Mandy, thanks for sharing about that. But I do have a question. Does the county executive office have any recommendations or resources those who are in the county?
So a lot of our senior centers are offering like some physically fit, things for a lot of our senior members. They're doing a lot of virtual classes, exercise or group fitness classes. So we can pull together some resources from the OCE team. We'll see what else we can find out there. And then we can share that with you all, so you can share with these members too.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
I know we had a couple people in the chat who mentioned that they really enjoyed the exercise for the stress relief and activity. So I did Miss who wanted to perhaps share or give a comment, had any reflection about it for them.
The man that my friend, I forgot your name, John Olszewski, kind of metamorphosized a little bit. Is your dog telling you get off me?
I'm the Johnny O with the tan. But yeah, she is, I tell you, you know, this has been a phenomenal platform for me to be a part of because having been in human services and many of my colleagues as well, and I talk about this because it happens to us regularly, engaging with and meeting with individuals that are coming to you, sometimes they are in a victim state. They want you to somehow co-sign, for lack of a better term, this negative space that they're in. They'll twiddle around and lose their language. I like to say, I don't mean that derogatorily, but there's no positive in any of the language that they're using. And we can only get where we're going if we're going to do it together, he or she and I, or the group. And this was very important to be able to say what you said, Darius, about, you know, continuing to find a way to decompress, get recharged, and be able to go back and serve positively or contribute to positively whatever space that you're in. So for me, this has just been phenomenal. And you need to get yourself a dog, dude. Just stop kidding yourself. I'm coming over, I'm gonna knock on your door with my dog. That's all.
Okay.
But thank you so much for having us.
No problem. Again, I wanted to share my resource section again. All Walks of Life, Win Family Services, they're really good organizations and they have really talented therapists. Miss Benita Smith, she's an extremely talented therapist who focus on women with depression, anxiety, or grief. So if you know anyone who needs help, please make sure that you provide them with these resources. And then if you want to throw me in there too, then y'all can throw me in there. But
I again wanted to remind everybody, these sessions were so phenomenal. If you did not register by Eventbrite, I would ask Lauren and Tierra if you would leave that link up for 24 hours, or if you can, just to make sure everybody has properly given their email address so we can get the replay back to them once it's packaged, edited, and all. Again, Dr. Darius, you were phenomenal, and the information was great. And I just wanted to close my part with saying that thank you for consenting to be with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
no problem.
Our tech person will be putting up our contact information momentarily. But again, we're Keys of Hope Consultants. We do a lot of mental health training. Tierra and I are also licensed clinical social workers who offer platforms such as this. Every year we do, well, this year because of COVID, this was a good collaboration with Life Builders Church because we do have a Sanity in the Sanctuary Conference that we do for faith leaders. And then we will be continuing that on for next year, but we also do trauma training. We're trauma clinicians. So we do a lot of training around trauma-informed care. So our contact information will also be up that if you have any training needs for your staff or your organization, we are available to help meet those needs. Okay, our email and website have been placed in the chat. So we're not going to you guys much longer. It's 8 o'clock. So thank you everybody again for coming on this evening. If you have been with us for the past 5 weeks and you came to every session, thank you so much. Hopefully you have been blessed, your lives have been enriched. You are leaving with some additional tools in your backpack that you can carry to get through the remainder of this year and through next year, and that you can take this information and support somebody else. So thank you everybody again for coming. Have a blessed evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Bye.